Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 4, Episode 31 of the Senstennial Podcast. Today, we're excited to be joined by senior writer for The Athletic, Aaron Portzline. So, Aaron, thank you for joining us tonight.
You bet, guys. Thanks for having me.
For those who don't know Aaron, he's been a reporter and journalist providing some detailed coverage of the Columbus Blue Jackets for quite some time now, and has been a sports writer for also quite some time now, for about 30 plus years. So we're excited to have his expertise on the show and to be able to pick his brain a bit tonight. So, Aaron, as you know, the Ottawa Senators decided to ink the longtime Blue Jackets goaltender Joonas Korpisalo to a 5-year deal on the first day of free agency this summer. And honestly, we just kind of wanted to know, why do you think he maybe picked Ottawa? And do you think that being linked up with his former teammate in Cleveland, Anton Forsberg, had anything to do with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'm first of all, I'm really happy for Jonas because I think he's deserved this opportunity for a while now, and he had to wait his turn very patiently in Columbus behind Bobrovsky, behind Merzlikins. And honestly, I know the Blue Jackets wouldn't like to hear this, but it's true. If it weren't for contractual matters, if it weren't for the fact that they chose to sign Merzlikins to the long-term deal
Yeah.
over Korpisalo a couple of years ago, they would have never gotten rid of Korpisalo. Of all the goalies they've got on the roster right now, he's the guy in the room that is absolutely beloved. He works his ass off. The team works their ass off for him. He's been through a lot. He is a really, really good team guy. And, I'm surprised that the Kings didn't do more to keep him, honestly. But I love this opportunity for him because it's something he can run with. I think he and Forsberg got along very well. At least everything I've heard suggests that they did. They actually shared the net during the Cleveland AHL Cleveland run to the championship. They both took turns where they were the best goalies. I think it was Forsberg that finished it out. But Korpisalo was out of his mind early on in the championship series and throughout the playoffs. He's a really good goalie, and he's changed a lot, noticeably since he's had the major hip surgery. And I think, as dumb as it sounds, he might even agree. He might even agree with me. He's a better goalie now on the other side of a hip surgery. He relies much less on his bendiness and his reaction, and he's a much more structurally sound goalie where the puck finds him more than it did before. He makes those saves where you don't really make them as much as the puck just finds you because you're right where you need to be. He doesn't move as lightning quick, but he also doesn't overplay pucks like he did maybe early in his career. He's one of those guys that there's a lot of people in Columbus, in the room and beyond, that are rooting for him to do well in this stop because he's that kind of guy.
Yeah, and actually, we were going to ask you about the surgery a bit later, but we'll get to it now.
Yeah.
I think it was back in 2022 that Jarmo Kekalainen essentially said that Korpisalo had been dealing with an issue for some time, and that he was finally going to get surgery, and obviously that was his hip. And so,
Yeah.
do you think that was like a big factor, really, into his performances and like how he was playing maybe before the surgery compared to afterwards?
Yeah, and it speaks to his character because of course it does. Of
Yeah.
course, if your hip is bad enough that you need a really serious surgery, and a long one to get over, you're playing through some stuff. You can't hide a hip as a goalie. So it was, but as part of his character, he would never lean on that as an excuse for his struggles. And he honestly, if he were, I don't know if I could say this, I don't know if he'd do it again or not, but there are lots of people, and I think sometimes in as a professional athlete, you do at times have to be selfish and say, okay, enough of this. I've got to get this right. And I think he delayed that much, much longer than many other people would have in order to keep playing for the team. But I do think it absolutely affected him. And he was slow coming around last year. And all you have to do if you want to sell this goalie to the Ottawa Senators fans, pull Joonas Korpisalo's numbers out of the Blue Jackets goaltending stats from last season when they were just an awful defense.
Yeah.
And look how alone his numbers stand compared to literally everybody else that played for them. There's a bunch of guys down here, and here's Korpisalo up here. Nobody could have had success. Nobody could have had success with that team in front of them last year. Not good enough to begin with, and then just a million injuries. But his numbers were so clearly better than everybody else's. I think his season probably deserves a lot more respect than it's going to get just based upon how bad everything was.
Yeah. And I think that especially for Sens fans, they're very wary because, as you likely know, Ottawa traded for Matt Murray and that just did not work out. And then they did trade for Cam Talbot. And of course, he had some expectations on his shoulders and again did not work out. And so they're just kind of wary bringing goalies who've had injuries or inconsistencies in the past. So I think it's a bit of like that too. But for me, like personally, I was excited because Ottawa really doesn't have anyone aside from Anton Forsberg who can fill the gap as like a 1B or just a backup. And Forsberg, I don't think can handle, 50 games in a season. So I think that's probably why some fans are tempering their expectations. They've been hurt too much recently.
I get it. Yeah, and the Blue Jackets too, with literally there are points for the franchise, and Ottawa's been through this as well, where nothing you do is going to engender any confidence or hope with people because the people are so conditioned to things going the wrong way, right? There are places like, I don't know, Pittsburgh, where everything seems to fall into place. And then there are places like Columbus where the layups get missed somehow.
Yeah.
But one thing about Korpisalo is he will empty the tank every night. There's no question about that.
And I think he's always been a goalie that Ottawa Senators fans have kept their eye on because, I mean, as you definitely know, he almost single-handedly ended the Leafs playoff hopes a couple of years back on the back of some of the most beautiful goaltending I've ever seen.
Yeah,
that was a thing to behold, and that was the summer that the Sens traded for Matt Murray, and I remember it being, should we go get Korpisalo or should we go get Matt Murray? And one had just come off a pretty bad season with Murray, and Korpisalo just did what he did.
Yeah.
And so now you get to see Corpy with a fully bionic hip now.
Yeah.
And he you got to watch him play the bulk of 2022-23 season on both Columbus and LA. And so what were your thoughts on his performances on both teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of those guys when he ended up at LA, he probably felt like he won the lottery a little bit.
Yeah.
Just, given what this team, how this team was playing. I mean, it got, believe it or not, it got better as the season went on defensively, but it was just not a pretty sight. I mean, there were games early in the season where you could just tell this team they don't know what they're doing in the defensive zone. Like no one's sure what's going on. And so I talked to a person who worked for the team, former NHL defenseman, and said, hey, can you help me out? Like, I'm looking at this team. I'm trying to figure out if they play man or if they play zone. I've spent 5 games looking at this. I can't figure out what they're doing. Like, that's embarrassing. I'm humbling myself here. And he says, I don't know either. Like they were doing some sort of hybrid where it was zone when the puck is above the circles and man on man when the puck up below the circles. And it was just clear that it wasn't a fit. It wasn't communicated to the players in a way that they knew what was going on. So you'd see these moments against Pittsburgh where they're playing their asses off because they always play hard against Pittsburgh because it means so much to them. And then there's a huge face-off with like a minute and a half left. And there's number 87, I forget his name. All right, Sidney Crosby, who's just wide open in front of the net. No one's got Crosby. And you're like, guys, like
that's the one guy you're supposed to have on Pittsburgh.
Through, like, I mean, it's just stuff like that. And so no goaltender is when you're facing 22 grade A chances, like literally 25, 28 grade A chances a night. Some of these games, it's a wonder it wasn't 13 goals against.
Yeah.
So he's got that as the backdrop. And again, it did get a little bit better as the season went on in terms of just being able to get out of the zone and not get overwhelmed. But they were so just devastated by injuries. It was just a patchwork the whole way. And then he gets to LA. I think you can say really, really played well.
Yeah.
In a lot of those games with structure, with talent in front of him. His good friend Gavrikov went with him, an underrated player as well. And all we heard about was Gavrikov's not a great player. He's not very good. And it's so much of this game is environment. And then he ends up in LA. People go, hey, Gavrikov's, he's a pretty good player. You're like, yeah, he's pretty good. And he was pretty good here 3 years earlier when the stuff around him made sense too. He's not a top pair defenseman, but that's what he was playing in Columbus because of all the injuries. I mean, Eric Branson is not a top 4 defenseman by anyone.
We actually know that from experience.
Yeah. Now, but you put him on a third pair in the right mix, play him in the right minutes, in the right situations, can be a very effective player still. Not a top pair guy, but that's where he was with all the injuries. Of course, it's not going to look good.
Yeah.
And so it was that kind of stuff. And then he gets to LA and it's like, oh, right. This is what it feels like when you've got this in front of you. And you saw him bloom. And I think Ottawa is one of the real up and coming teams in the NHL. And I think there's reason to believe he could have a good run there.
I think I can speak for a lot of Sens fans in saying that's good to hear.
Yeah, you're doing a hell of a sell job right now.
It's excellent. It's excellent. You've even sprinkled in some former Sens, like we go nuts for that.
Doesn't work out. Goalies are strange, but I think he's a hell of a player.
Yeah, and you spoke to the whole if you're a goalie and your hip doesn't work, then
yeah, problem.
I'm a goalie and I have sciatica, so I get it. Not to the level that Korpisalo, plays, but obviously it's tough. And when you have an injury consistently like that, it's hard. And speaking of that, prior to this season, Korpisalo was a bit inconsistent in his results. And who knows really how much that is to do with how long the injury has been around and so on. But what do you think? Or why do you think that this season was different than those before it?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the hip allowed him to play, allowed him to move more freely. I think it also I think he was out for like the first month of the season and came back at the pace he needed to come back at. But I think it also forced him to play the position in a different way. Like I was saying earlier, I think he knew he probably didn't feel comfortable relying on his cat quick reflexes right off the bat. You don't trust the injury. It's like Werenski's going through this now with the shoulder, where at some point he's going to get hit and it's going to scare the hell out of him.
Yeah.
He's going to realize it's okay. Like, I'm not saying that from experience. I'm saying that from what players who have come back from injuries always say. And I'm sure goalies, and Joonas was the same way, where you trust it. It feels better. You can tell it feels better, but it takes a long time. That's a big joint. It takes a long time to really get back to where you were before. And so you don't want to push it too far right away. I think that sort of easing his way back into it and realizing that he needed to adopt maybe a more controlled way. I think he's a more thoughtful goalie now because he has to be. And I think it served him well. I mean, I can't tell you how many more times it just seemed like the puck found him, uh, because he's where he needed to be. Whereas early in his career, he wasn't a nightmare structurally, but he relied on being able to get to pucks that maybe other goalies couldn't get to. Elvis Merzlikins still relies on that, tries to make the highlight save rather than just, it's not enough to just have a boring 30 save game for him. There's got to be something in there that's crazy. And I think Korpisalo has really matured from that. And he can now have quiet games where you don't recognize maybe how well he's played because he hasn't made any 10 bell saves or, any bad stacks. He's just made every save he's supposed to make. And sometimes that's all a team needs from a goalie. That's enough. Like, just make the stops you're supposed to make, steal a couple here and there. You don't have to be a hero. And I think Korpisalo has really adopted kind of a new, more steady approach to the position without relying so much on his athleticism. He's a great athlete.
Yeah. And that sounds a lot like Craig Anderson. Like, when he was with Ottawa, he wasn't known for, making all these wacky saves and everything. He's just a very positionally sound goalie. Like you said, with Korpisalo, like, he's just, the puck finds him. He's where he needs to be. And I think Ottawa just needed that. They didn't need a guy who was flashy, flying all over the crease like a Hasek or a Brodeur or whatever. It's just, you need a guy who just sits in the net, does his job, and goes about it like it's everyday business, So that's good to hear. But after the break, we'll ask Aaron whether Korpisalo can help the Sens make next year's playoffs and what kind of guy Korpisalo is away from the rink. Hey, Sens fans, it's baseball season, and new customers who download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN can bet just $5 and score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelpline.ma.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort, Kansas. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10 plus leg required for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms. Hey, Sens fans. Even if you're not going on vacation, summer's all about a vacation state of mind. Whether I want to listen to a band like Blink-182 on repeat or just need to retreat inside my own head for a bit, I love creating my own summer soundtrack by popping in my Raycon wireless earbuds. There's so much going on all summer. Sometimes you need some upbeat music to pump you up before you see people or to just stay calm with some guided meditation. When I'm going to the gym, I got to pop in those Raycons because I got to get my tunes going, whether that's something more heavy like an Avenged Sevenfold or something a bit lighter like my pop punk mix. So let me tell you right now, Raycons are the best way to listen. Use earbud tab functions to toggle between 3 customizable sound profiles, noise isolation, and awareness mode. Raycons have a 32-hour battery life, including 8 hours of playtime, so you can listen to what you want, when you want, for a really long time. They come with custom gel tips for the most comfortable in-ear fit. They start at half the price of other premium audio brands, but they sound just as good. And Raycons come with that 30-day happiness guarantee, so you really can't lose. Create your own soundtrack with Raycon. Right now, Senstennial Podcast listeners can get 15% off their Raycon order at buyraycon.com/THPN. That's buyraycon.com/THPN to save 15% on your Raycon order. buyraycon.com/THPN. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for listening or watching so far. And if you've enjoyed the episode so far, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We appreciate all the support. Aaron, thank you again for your time. We're going to ask you this one. Actually, I'm going to throw to other Matt actually to kick things off.
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things where, you spoke to Bobrovsky and with Merzlikins, and Korpisalo has always had a guy in front of him.
Yeah.
And with the Sens as they're built now, he's, I would say, the bona fide starter. So I guess the question is, do you believe Korpisalo can be the guy and get the Sens into the playoffs this year?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think he's nothing against Korpisalo. I don't think he's the guy that does that by himself. I think the rest of it's got to be there too. I think he can be part of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, Ottawa's a really interesting club. Where did they finish out of it last year? How far out of it?
They were 6 points out.
6 points behind Florida.
Yeah, right. And there's going to be
at one point we were ahead of Florida.
Oh yeah. Florida just got in.
Yeah.
There's going to be some movement in the East, I would think, too. Like what? I'm not ready to count out Boston, but you can't just take two top centers out and say everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
What do we know about Pittsburgh and Washington? Two clubs that are really in transition. I think Pittsburgh got better this summer, but it's still the same, largely the same cast among the top impact type players. Washington's kind of in a similar spot. So I don't rule out Ottawa's, coming in as as a wild card or a third place team in their division. I don't think that's crazy. I don't pretend to know what's going to happen. If we knew what was going to happen, none of this would be any fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't rule it out. I'm not a betting guy either, and I certainly wouldn't put a ton of money on him doing it. But I think it's going to be an interesting season in Ottawa. I think it's going to be a lot better than some of the recent seasons you've had, and I think they can play a lot better than they did last year. And can they close a 6-point gap? Oh, heck yeah, for sure they can.
Yeah,
all they have to do is win in November, and they've closed the gap.
Yeah,
and injuries to like Shabbat, Chikrin, Norris, you name it, I think didn't help. So
Norris a good Ohio State kid.
Sorry,
Norris a good Ohio State kid.
Oh, Halliday?
Or Norris?
No,
Norris. Sorry. I thought Norris went to Michigan.
No, I don't think. Did he? Who am I screwing up?
No, I think, Halliday went to Ohio State, and I believe Norris did go to Michigan.
Yeah.
Where's Norris from, though? Is he from Ohio?
I thought he's from the Michigan area.
Of course he is. It just checks out.
But unlike another Michigan player decided to sign long-term in Ottawa.
Gosh.
But yeah, no, like Norris being healthy, I think is huge. He only played 8 games last season. So I think that's almost like, adding a top 6 player for a full season now that, according to Pierre Dorion, Norris's shoulder is fixed, I guess, according to the medical staff. So hopefully going into this season, that's something that Sens fans don't have to worry about. But
I love Chikrin too. Is a guy that the Blue Jackets made a big push to get.
Yeah, wasn't there basically a trade in place last summer and then it fell apart?
Well, that's up to some. It depends on who you talk to. The Blue Jackets say, let me see if I get this right. It was at not this year's draft, obviously, but the draft last summer.
Yeah,
there was talk that Chikrin was traded to the Blue Jackets, or there was a trade in place, and he expressed not wanting to go there because it wasn't a playoff team.
Huh.
And the Blue Jackets said, well, all right then. And then a week later signed Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah.
Chychrun remained in Phoenix, and then like a week after that called and said, I may have misspoke earlier. Maybe things could happen. And then that train had left the station.
Yeah.
But they made a run at him at this trade deadline as well when they traded Gavrikov and Korpisalo, oddly enough. They tried to flip the Kings first round pick.
Yeah.
As part of the deal to get Chychrun. And we're told, I'm not sure if this was just Phoenix's way of placating them, that their offer was actually better for Chychrun, but they liked the first round pick being higher for sure this year in the trade from Ottawa.
Yeah, I think it also helped that Chychrun's grandfather is like a season ticket
Absolutely.
holder for the Sens, like since 1992 or something.
100%. Yeah.
So that helps, and he has family in the area. So I think, and plus, like, I know at the time he didn't know DeBrincat was going to be out the door, but you bring in guys like Claude Giroux and Alex DeBrincat in a single summer, and I think that perks up the ears of some players. So that might have helped as well.
It was a strange thing though, because he did not have control over his destiny.
Yeah.
No, but
I think
somehow had control over his destination. Like, how does this happen?
It's seemingly happening so much nowadays. We're all too familiar with somebody deciding they wanted to go to Detroit and nowhere else.
Well, yeah, Columbus fans about, it's not so much Detroit here, but they have they had an exit of players through the years.
Oh yeah, listen, I think it was a masterclass when you guys did what you did, getting Matt Duchene, you guys pushed all of the chips in, and I haven't seen something like that in the NHL in a while. And Kekalainen made the NHL fun when he did that. That was awesome.
That's reckless, but it was fun to watch.
It was reckless, absolutely, but it was fun to watch.
It was also like, as a Sens fan, it was cool to see like Duchene go there. Well, I mean, I really liked Duchene, so it was a bit sad that he only lasted a season and a half in Ottawa, but to see him go, and then a couple days later Dzingel go there as well, and he was all excited to be joining Duchene and sweeping the Lightning. That was just a really cool thing. It's too bad. Too bad they didn't go further, but cool NHL moment for sure.
Highlight of the franchise.
So the one other question I wanted to get to, and you kind of touched on a little bit right at the beginning, but Sens fans tend to be enamored with those players who are kind of more outgoing and engage with the community and all that. And I'm not really sure how much Columbus does that sort of thing, but if there was community engagement that Columbus tried to do during Korpisalo's tenure there, was Korpisalo involved in anything like that?
So I would say Korpisalo was always willing and always involved in things like this. I think he, like a lot of Finns, he probably leans toward the shy side, where, he's great with fans, and I'm not saying he's not, but he's not this super outgoing, gregarious guy. Very kind, but sort of soft-spoken and you almost get the sense that he's surprised people recognize him, kind of thing. He's very well grounded. He's a classic Finn, is what he is. When the Blue Jackets went to Finland, Tampere, and Helsinki this year for the Global Series, I was trying to come up with a bunch of different sort of different story ideas you just can't do with guys when they're here. And one of them was going to a heavy metal bar with Korpisalo, who is a big fan.
Amazing.
I like it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm an idea guys, not an execution guy in this one, but an idea guy. And he loves Scandinavian heavy metal. It is still really popular over there. And he's totally into it. He's turned me on to a couple of bands that he's into, that he listens to get wound up. And yeah, it never came to be, because it was sort of like, he's a down to earth enough guy where you're asking him the question, and then you're kind of like, no NHL guy is going to go to a heavy metal bar with, like the night before a game. Like, what who are you trying to sell here? So it never came to be. I ended up going by myself, but he's totally into it, and I thought it would have been a great story. But he's always up for those kind of sort of oddball conversations. Proud Finn, and the one story that really took off here was that he still has not done his compulsory military.
Oh yeah,
which all Finns are required to do. I think the hip surgery allowed him to delay it a couple of years. He could be belly crawling in a field right now in the middle of Finland for all we know, going through it. You got to go through it at some point. They don't let athletes out of it anymore. But anytime Korpisalo's name came up, it was, where's the stand with his military service? And I kept saying, Corpy, listen, I'm not going to bug you. I just need a picture of you crawling, going over an obstacle course. I need some sort of Corpy military picture. And he would laugh and promise me half-hearted, even though I know it's never going to come to be. But he's a good dude, and he's an interesting cat, and he will be one of the guys in the room that the players really come to admire and play hard for, because he's that kind of guy. It's not just how he's wired.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the death metal story. Like, I will say there definitely was one Columbus Blue Jacket that would do that, and that's Mike McKenna. He is a metalhead through and through.
Yeah. Mike Commodore is always up for stuff like that too.
Two former Ottawa Senators. Wow. Sprinkle in a little more. We've talked a lot about the Sens, and obviously, like, you cover the Blue Jackets. So I have to ask, how stoked were you when Anaheim said Leo Carlsson's name?
Well, I was surprised a bit. There, about an hour before the draft, people started whispering that Anaheim is taking Karlsson. And I wish now I had the guts to tweet it. You didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
So to throw it out there would have been pretty reckless. But you know what, for this franchise, and nothing against Karlsson, because I think he's going to be a heck of a player too, from everybody says. But Fantilli is just such a windfall for them. The draft has never gone their way. We had statisticians look at the numbers of how many times they've been up for the number one pick, how many times and how many times the lottery has just completely crushed them.
Yeah.
It happened again this year. I mean, you can't say crushed. They went from 2 to 3, but that can be devastating depending on how the draft went. For it to fall the way that it did, they had no expectation. I don't believe that Fantilli was going to be there at 3. And in fact, they would not have taken Karlsson at 3 if Fantilli went second.
Do you know who they would have taken?
They were going Will Smith.
Oh, I love that pick too.
They were going Will Smith. It was like, and they were prepared for Will Smith over Karlsson and to wait a year to help fix their center ice position.
Interesting.
And all the way that it did these things just don't typically happen to them. And so they were absolutely, I was surprised, honestly, that Jarmo took the steps up
and didn't just leap
the shoulder roll onto the dais and make the pick before they could take it away from him. But it was it's one of those things I think you might look back. I think the Sillinger Johnson draft, that fell for them too. They were kind of thinking this is Johnson or Sillinger at 5. And then the fact that Sillinger was still sitting there at 12 for them a year earlier was a huge, or 2 years ago, was they thought was a huge get.
Yeah.
And
don't remind us who.
Although listen, I think Jay's going to be a pretty good player. He's going to be an impact player. I still believe that. But yeah, so it has the potential to be really big. And now maybe they finally have their top center.
I think Fantilli is a beast. I'm so happy Columbus was able to get him. Like,
And in
they
most other
deserved it.
drafts, he's first overall pick. So to get him at 3 was huge.
Crazy.
He goes first in the draft before this draft, you know, like
no question.
Yeah.
Well,
that's crazy.
On that note, Aaron, we don't have anything else to ask you, and you've already given us a ton of information and insight onto Korpisalo, and we really appreciate that because you know, you hear this, that, and the other thing, but actually getting to talk to someone who's seen him play for the majority of his career really helps to kind of highlight the highs and lows. So thank you for joining us. And
my pleasure, guys. My pleasure. And I wish you well. I'll talk to you down the road, maybe.
For
Absolutely.
sure.
We'd love to have you back.
Before you go, is there anything that you'd want to plug that you have maybe coming down the pipeline?
No, just taking a little summer breather here. The Sunday Notes column takes a break for a few weeks, and we're still writing about the Blue Jackets. There's still stuff. We caught up to Werenski, who was on skates playing semi-competitive hockey in a summer league game the other night for the first time since his shoulder injury. So good news there. That story runs tomorrow morning.
Nice.
But yeah, we'll keep plugging away.
Was it the Beauty League? Was that it?
No, it's Columbus has a 4-team league called the Cap City League.
Oh, cool. Right on.
Probably awesome. 16, 18, 12 to 16 NHL guys.
Okay.
Play a bunch of college guys and AHL guys. Sillinger, Werenski, Line, Karali, Roslovic. Pretty good turnout. You can't get a goalie to play in these things. And
hey, they can fly me down. I'll do it. There
you go. Yeah.
Awesome.
You're ready to see some rubber.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, Aaron, and enjoy the rest of your summer.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Aaron.
No problem.
Have a good one.